This is Andrea Longton.
This is Leah Freemouth.
And this is Ebony Perkins. And we are Renegade Capital.
All views expressed in this podcast are our own. We are not financial planners, investment advisors, or tax advisors. The views that we have on this show do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the people who sign our paychecks. So please keep that in mind and always consult a trained financial professional before you start moving your hard-earned money. Let's dive in.
Yeah. Artificial intelligence and how it is and has been changing our world. We started with this topic kind of skeptical of like how it would connect to Renegade Capital and some of the other topics that we've covered through the last couple seasons and even this past season. But as we learned more about some of the work that our guests are doing and just even how philanthropy and investors are looking to kind of inform and support organizations that are supportive and very excited about artificial intelligence and the development of those tools, but to develop a focus on the public good and how it can increase access to things like education, capital, healthcare, just even how our lives are just more efficient. As this topic kind of came online as an idea, I feel like all three of us kind of got to a place where like, oh, maybe this is a fit. What was kind of the tipping point for you all as far as bringing speakers on around this?
I am still a healthy skeptic, to be honest. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm scared of AI and the impact that it could have in finance. And so I'm actually really eager to talk through this with experts. I want to have the conversation so that I can learn more, because while I'm scared of it, I don't actually know very much about it. And I'd rather not be ignorant of something that seems like it's a huge wave of how we're going to be doing business and just living our lives in the future.
I am extremely cautious about jumping on the bandwagon when it comes to pretty much anything, but especially like stuff you hear about in the media, right? So you're hearing a lot about AI. I know that AI was a big topic for the actors and writers strike. And to be honest, I don't know much about it. It feels a little bit like social media to me, and that there are pros and cons in it. It's just how you use it. But I don't know exactly what exactly it is and what that means for the future of this work. And to be really honest with you, especially when we are trying to question the system that has created the inequities that we're in, can a system really dismantle that? So I don't know. I'm intrigued to find out.
Leo, why was this topic really important to you? Because you pushed hard on this and you really pushed me and Ebony to expand how we think about this and to talk about it on the show and to give it, I know you have pushed me personally to really think about it. Why is it important to you? What's your passion behind it?
Because I don't know how it's going to influence the work that we do, or, the systems that we've talked about on the show that we're trying to break down, but it's here. It's not going anywhere. So to know more about it and like our guests that we'll talk to today, we have a leader in philanthropy, investing in organizations like New Public, who is the other guest is a founder and principal of, where the investments are creating research and innovations and kind of, I guess, even parameters around how AI should be restricted and maybe regulated, so the public good and that can be managed in some form or fashion. I listened to a webinar, which is where I heard about Katy Knight at first. She's the CEO of the Siegel Family Foundation that we'll be talking to, and there was a panel discussion, but they equated the legal system and what was done decades ago and generations ago around even now just the public defender system, and that the law system had to be kind of managed around public good, because those with access to lawyers and the legal system had the money and the means to make it work for them. And there was a very intentional movement by the grassroots efforts and, different people that led that to kind of put some parameters around that. And so one of the guest speakers on that webinar, which we can link in the show notes, it was hosted by Arabella Advisors, compared the two, and that we're at that kind of moment in time with AI and the investments in these organizations, researching and creating, I guess, looking to see what they can do to create parameters around it.
So I think with AI, it's also an opportunity. I think a lot of times we become afraid of stuff we just don't understand, and there is no freaking denying how much and how far technology has brought us as a society. It's just how do we use it for good? And I think that's the overall message and answers that we're searching for today, right?
Actually, Ebony, what you said there reminded me of a quote that we pulled out that Katy Knight said on that webinar. And this is quoting her verbatim. We ask how technology can be shaped and deployed in ways that better society. We believe the path of technology innovation is not set in stone, but rather guided by decisions made by us all. Our goal is to help inform those that are developing innovations, those that deploy new technology, and those that set policies and guidelines across sectors. So, she gets paid the big bucks to lead and write about this stuff. But your note about society and how it's influencing that, hopefully it's what we talked about tonight.
Do you think we're all unduly influenced by the horror movies about technology and AI? And so that's like created a lens through which we see this, if we can only see how things can go poorly. And we have these like doomsday scenarios or scenarios that are designed to scare us and make us question things.
Well, Andrea, I think that question's interesting because what scares me is not the movies, but it's the standardization of decision making that we fight against, right, in our day jobs and what we talk about on this podcast. And so, like, if my impression of AI making standardization and decision making more efficient because it learned on how you did the last one, well, if we did that, then credit score would be the perfect formula for banking people, and so that's where I'm scared of how this will replace the context of the human story and kind of the human piece of the work that we're involved in.
And to me, it's also, yes, and who gets which AI technologies, right? So like the technologies that you get for free are not very good, at least not right now. But the technologies that you pay money for and might be a bit better or know you a bit more, who gets access to those versus whatever you get for free on the street, or for free on the World Wide Web. I was working with somebody this summer who was putting together a business plan for a small business. And he was like, I'm just going to throw it all into the chat GPT and for his business plan. And he did. And I was like, we cannot use this. Like, yes, it exists. And like, yes, it has the name of your business in here, but no.
Even on this, like on the small side of that, like there's tech now that I don't want to name the name because I don't know if it's any good or not, but the function that they're trying to replace or to create efficiency around is grant writing. And so the organization feeds in old proposals, editorial guides, things like that. And then the new user can feed in questions from a new grant application, and it will take old copy and kind of start to answer the questions for you. So for, someone that's running a firm that has a very small team, time and kind of making those proposals and that writing faster. And even, that's money we're not spending on a consultant, we're spending on lending.
Yeah, very true. This is Andrea Longton.
This is Ebony Perkins.
This is Leah Freemow, and we are Renegade Capital. Today, we are talking about artificial intelligence and how innovations and research are framing it for public good.
Renegade Capital Podcast is proud to be sponsored by U.S. Bancorp Impact Finance, a subsidiary of U.S. Bank, which is an industry leader in providing financial solutions that help create positive impact for communities and the environment. For 35 years, its tax credit investments in syndications, lending, and other financial solutions have helped create affordable housing, spur economic activity in underserved communities, restore historic buildings, develop renewable sources of energy, and strengthen community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, nationwide. Learn more at usbank.com/impactfinance.
So, Katy, Deepti, as a way of introduction, would you tell us a little bit about your story and your background and how you got into the work that you currently do and its connection to artificial intelligence or AI, and how it's kind of fueling you these days?
Yeah, so I had a winding path to philanthropy and tech philanthropy in particular, which is its own beast. So to try to make a long story short, I took some time off in college. I'd been sort of interning in the nonprofit space and just was dissatisfied with education in the moment. Like, there were lots of reasons, but took some time off school. So I joined the working world in the early aughts, and I was working at a real estate company, did some community work as part of the marketing there, was working part-time in a nonprofit, went back to school, graduated, went back to that nonprofit, realized I was making like $9 an hour, and that was why I couldn't pay my rent. So I was also working in catering. But I wound up looking for a new job and went to work at Google by accident. Like, I saw a marketing job, wasn't sort of super hungry to work at Google, but I thought, hey, I can do this and it'll probably pay me more than the nonprofit work. So let me jump in. It turned out that I was a great fit because Google Plus was launching at the time and they were looking to develop nonprofit partnerships. So I joined like the Google Plus marketing team, and I got an early lesson in failure in the tech space because obviously Google Plus did not last. Sometimes recently I asked someone, or I told someone my story and I said I worked at Google Plus, and they said, what is that? So great. Um, and then from there, I worked on public policy, community engagement, corporate social responsibility work, education work, and got pulled over and met this sort of interesting guy who had made a lot of money in financial services doing quantitative investment management. I went to work at his company and sort of got pulled into his personal philanthropy because, like me, he is concerned about the impact of technology on society. And that was about, almost a decade ago. And I think when we were talking about that challenge then, it felt like, oh, this is something addressable, right? Like, tech and society, there's a lot going on here. Maybe not a lot of people are focused on it. And now it is everything and everywhere. And so, to your other question about how that relates to AI, we at Siegel Family Endowment are focused on the impact of technology on society and how we understand and shape that. I think a lot of our work in the last decade has been about understanding what technology is doing to society and how we as humans are living in a world of pervasive tech. AI is certainly not new, but I think in terms of it being out in the world in a big way, it is new enough that we still have the opportunity to shape it. So that's where I think our work as a foundation, investing in what the future might look like with these emerging technologies, is related to AI and actually like really exciting right now for me. So it's I often say working in tech philanthropy is my penance for the years I spent at Google. And I think Deepti has similar perhaps about her path. But yeah, I'm just really excited about the way that we're able to actually attack the AI questions, challenges, and problems from like an understand and shape opportunity.
How old, from a tech standpoint, is this type of technology? And is there a really simple example or, kind of mundane example where we might go, oh, I've been using AI for 30 years and I didn't know, or something, just so we can understand the full continuum that we're on?
AI, machine learning, the notion of developing algorithms, like, that's decades and decades, because that's fundamentals of computer science. I think artificial intelligence, machine learning, as we might think of it, autofill in Google searches or in your text messaging, that's AI. And so we've been doing that for ages, even when we were T9 texting, if you remember that, right? Like, so that is a version of AI. It's just not as sexy and shiny as the chat bots that have made the news in the last year.
I totally forgot about T9 texting. And I remember when I got it and anyway, there was a whole moment where my fellow bartender friend was like, "You're finally caught up," but because I was using all my thumbs. So thanks. Deepti, do you mind sharing too?
Yeah, my entry into this work is really kind of grounded in my own kind of like story as an immigrant here. My parents are from India. They came over here in the 70s, and they came from kind of lower middle class families. And so we spent our summers going and spending 3 or 4 months in India each summer. And like I still have really visceral memories of feeling kind of the difference, from the stark difference in the way that we were as 3 kids living our lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the lives that my parents came from, but also the communities that surrounded them, kind of in India. And for those of you who've been to India, you kind of know that the rich live on top of the poor. Gentrification looks a little bit different there than it looks like in the States. And so it's like you're really in it all the time. So I ended up becoming a community organizer. And as an organizer in India, I was creating this organization called H.A.L. And the goal of it was to bring together the rich and the poor, because in India, it is just really easy to privatize your way, to pay your way out of any sort of dependency on anybody else. Your kids go to private school. You can, even on things like the climate, you have private filters in your car that you walk straight into. You have private health care. And it just really struck me that, like, how can this be the world's largest democracy if in fact there's no real interdependency between the populations who live here together? And so H.A.L, kind of our angle into solving the problem was really local, was block by block, to bring to find the issues of common ground. And many of you may remember, there was a large, it became a very well-known rape case in 2012 of a woman named Nirbhaya in Delhi. And after that, women's safety became a really important topic in India, and that is a issue that you can't pay your way out of. And so we actually kind of used and galvanized that energy to bring together people on their own block, the rich and the poor together, to really figure out kind of what they wanted to do to make their own neighborhoods more safe and get into better relationship with a very local BMC, their Bombay Municipal Corporation, the police. And H.A.L actually has a really fun story. So my neighbor made up the name H.A.L. H.A.L is when construction workers are building something in India. There are a whole bunch of construction workers. And so one person says Zor Lagake, and that means with all of our strength. And then everybody together says H.A.L as they're lifting this like heavy boulder together. And that was what the inspiration of kind of the name of this organization was. Anyways, H.A.L grew, it scaled. We used college campuses to kind of grow and to identify organizers who took this work, block by block across the country. And they started using Facebook groups. And so that's how I became interested in the role of these digital tools in building healthier communities, because whether you were rich or poor, you likely were on Facebook or were on WhatsApp. And so it was, and particularly post-Arab Spring, became really interested in kind of the role of Facebook in democratizing power and in giving everybody a voice. And so that's what took me to Facebook. I was at Facebook for 7 years, much longer than I had ever anticipated being, and mainly worked on Facebook groups while I was there. And through that experience, saw the beauty of what can happen I experienced it at H.A.L and then I experienced it at a completely different scale at Facebook, but also what the horrors of some of the things that can happen in groups if they're not well managed or well moderated. eventually I became tired of running up against this incentive structure which governed us, which was that when we had to make tough decisions, it was really, really hard to support the leaders, the group admins, over our own needs to drive engagement and growth. And so that's then what led me to create New Public with Eli Pearser and Talia Stroud, my co-directors. And we're a little R&D lab that's supporting the creation of what we call digital public spaces, the parks and libraries of the digital age. And so we believe that these are critically important to maintain the social fabric of our society in the same way that those little Hayek block by block campaigns did, so that we preserve our democracy.
Could you expand a little bit more on kind of where we currently are with the innovations in the AI space and in the tech field, and how fast are things changing, and how's New Public kind of engaging in that?
I mean, for us, we're focused on fostering an ecosystem of the growth of healthy and thriving communities online. And so we're really dialed into social media, and generative AI for us is potentially upending everything about online communication, from content moderation to misinformation to even the coding that's required to develop the new platforms. There's probably not one area that generative AI isn't touching. And by definition, the changes we're seeing are exponential. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but every day I feel like I see another really interesting use case of AI. Most recently, somebody sent over to me a song that they built on AI with like a 10-word prompt. And then I used it to make an engagement song that I may or may not sing at my brother's wedding next February.
We won't tell them.
We support.
Yeah, tools and resources.
Yes.
And I think that as we become exposed to them, we begin to see our own concerns about some of the things that are coming up as well. What excites me is that we have the lessons of the last decade or 2 decades that move fast and break things. When Katy and I were embedded within the Googles and the Facebooks of the world is like no longer acceptable. And it seems to me that the risks it is that we're sensing are part of the conversation much earlier than they were at the advent of social media. And that is really exciting. Yes, we still have a little bit of regulatory gridlock around this issue. We still have a lot of kind of policy education that's needed to happen. We don't have a lot of understanding on the effects of young users of AI in particular. But I think we are way better positioned to know what questions to be asking and to be prepared for the unexpected.
Can you roll back a little bit whenever you talk about move fast and break things? What does that mean to you? Because I have an intuitive sense, but I feel like that might be a bigger part of culture around AI, and it sounds like that is changing a lot. What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm actually, if you're okay with me turning the question around, when you hear, I'm going to tell you what it meant at Facebook. But when you hear it, what do you hear?
What I hear is that from what you said in the past, it was just do it, go quickly, figure it out. If you break things, okay, we'll fix it later, or maybe we'll flow with it later. But then if you break things, then that has ramifications, and then you have to sort through those ripple effects, and you might lose control of the ripple effects.
Yeah. I think at the time where these college dropouts came together, to the far, far West and ended up over here, in that moment, what was driving them was a spirit of innovation and anything being possible, and wanting to create a culture, I think, in their, at that time, very small team at Facebook, of being comfortable with risk, being comfortable with mistakes. And, it's okay if it's important to keep our speed up so that we're maintaining a speed of innovation. And if that means that the code you built last week is no longer the right code, throw it out the window. Like, don't hold on to things, like keep going, keep moving forward. But I think that you're exactly right that has become a pervasive culture across Silicon Valley tech. And it really is grounded in a speed of innovation, keeping up with the market and serving the market as fast as you can, growing as quickly as you can, and delivering these kind of like 10x, 100x returns to VC, to your investors. And break things began over time to mean not just last week's code, like the real lives of people. And that's what has started to break and continues to break. And I do think that even at Facebook, I don't remember actually, so don't quote me on this, but we ended up changing the slogan because we acknowledged, maybe Katy will know what it changed to. I don't remember what it did. We acknowledged that like we can't have this philosophy at the scale that we were operating anymore. It's like slow down and fix things. Like we need to slow down and fix things is what we need to do. And I'm not suggesting that generative AI is slowing down and fixing things, but I do think that there's some lessons from this that have been are helpful to us as we head into the future.
Do you feel like there are guardrails now? Because when I think about breaking things, it's just to put my own lens on it. I think about it in finance, and in particular financing, and for people who have been chronically disconnected from the mainstream financial system. And so I want to see more guardrails in finance about how we are thinking about how mainstream, like fintech, is impacting lower wealth communities. And so whenever I think about AI in finance, and I go, whoa, what are the guardrails? Because AI is built by humans and can absorb the biases of humans. And so that's where I get nervous, is how are we thinking about regulation? How are we thinking about guardrails? How are we thinking about responsible financing if we're doing it through a lens of AI? And finance is built on technology. Like big finance is all about big technology. And just seeing how AI and generative AI is being applied to this feels like it's compounding some of those things. And how do we think about that? How do we have regulations against that? How do we keep that run fast and break things, or move fast and break things, from breaking a financial system that we're trying to have a more inclusive financial system?
So my short answer is, to your question, do we have enough guardrails? No, the answer is no. And, Katy should jump in here too, because I think she's been thinking about kind of policy reform more than we have. But no, we don't. We don't. And do we even have like the right people in the seats who are educated about these issues to develop the guardrails? I think that's also an important question here, and an important piece of the ecosystem that also needs to be invested in. But Katy, you should jump in here.
Well, I think so. On like the notion of move fast and break things, I feel like what is important about the story there is you take something, something that was said by a well-intentioned nerd to his team about their work, right? Break what you previously created. It doesn't matter. Break the site reliability. Break it in the quest to make it better. But it got adopted at this much larger scale where suddenly the companies themselves are aimed at moving fast and breaking things. Like I think about Uber, which some people roll their eyes when they're like talking about Uber is, you're just talking about extremes. But I don't think it's true that Uber's just an extreme, because it created sort of a model, but operating in kind of regulatory gray space, right? Like coming in and saying, this probably breaks the rules in spirit, but not in the letter. So we're going to undermine taxi prices. We're going to flood the market. We're going to do these things, and we'll figure out the consequences later, or the consequences don't actually touch us. The ripple effect doesn't actually ripple out to us. We're at the center of it. That's where the move fast and break things piece has turned the tech industry and like these advancements that we're making through tech into something to be not fearful of, but concerned about, and to be thinking differently about. And so when we talk about AI and like what's next or what we need to be doing or where the guardrail should be, I think we have to be thinking about how to keep pace with an industry that is now sort of drank so much of its own Kool-Aid and really has a lot of power and has tentacles that kind of reach into all other industries and think about like how do we people talk about reining in the tech industry, and I think it's not just about that. It's about kind of the process of designing regulation. It's about the entities and institutions that will create that can help, that will be filled with knowledgeable people, and that will do the work that allows us to keep up with what's going on. Like right now, we don't have appropriate guardrails because we're not sure what they should be and who should be making them or who has the authority to make them. And I think that piece that's where the regulation should start is like, okay, what's the authority here? What are we looking to do? How are we trying to set this up? But we're just not.
Renegade Capital Podcast is proud to be sponsored by Self-Help Credit Union and Self-Help Federal Credit Union, which believe in the power of finance to transform lives and communities. Are you an impact investor looking to make a difference? Look no further than Self-Help, where your deposits can create positive change. Don't just invest for profit, invest for impact. Visit selfhelp.org/invest-for-impact today and start depositing into a money market or term certificate with Self-Help Credit Union, where your money can change lives. Self-Help Credit Union, ownership and economic opportunity for all.
You made one point several times that it's important who the people are who are knowledgeable about the policies and who are knowledgeable about creating policies that, and I'm going to put my lens on it again, that create inclusive systems that have those right guardrails. What does that look like? Like, it's one thing to say, okay, we got to have the right people there, but how do you even do that? How do you even just start to think about that?
Yeah. So there's a few different pieces of it. So I'm not a computer scientist, right? And I feel like that's important to say because I work with and around and for so many people who have like deep computer science knowledge and are, my chairman is a roboticist, computer scientist, artificial intelligence expert, all of these things. And I think too often we think that those are the only people who can weigh in and help design regulation or figure this stuff out. If I can figure it out, you don't need to have a PhD in computer science to figure this stuff out. So I think first is like being tech adjacent, being a technologist, being part of like the conversation is not just limited to the people who have PhDs in this. And we need to kind of break that normative behavior where we're only asking experts. I think anyone can be trained in and understand technology and be fluent with it and kind of help write policy and regulations. I don't think we have great levers for getting people into the right places in government or other institutions to help steward and shepherd the sort of tech regulation we need. One thing that I'm excited about, and they're a grantee of ours at the Endowment, is Tech Congress, which is placing fellows in as staffers in congressional offices on both sides of the aisle who have deep knowledge of technology to help with the legislative process, to draft legislation, to just inform their electeds about tech and be that person. So that's like one way that we're trying to hack the system a bit, right? To get people who have knowledge into the rooms in the hope that then creates a sense that, oh, wait, if I don't have technical knowledge or knowledge about technology on my team as an elected official, then I'm missing something. And I think that has led to some culture shift there that I hope will actually lead us in the right direction in terms of regulation.
I want to add to this conversation, whether it's whether it's informing policy and the right talent there. In my humble opinion, anything that has to do with the future of technology, it is about bringing different disciplines together. We have to take a multidisciplinary approach. And to the extent it is that the audience here are investors and supporters of this sort of work, I think it's really, really important to be assessing the multidisciplinary nature of interventions. And we call it socio-technical leadership, where for us, as we think about what the creation of these parks and libraries of the internet are, is like, you need to understand, we need to bring the best in class thinking of sociology and group dynamics and group behaviors and norming, no matter what context they happen in, with some of this like best in class talent that we've been lucky to recruit from the Spotifys and the Googles and the Facebooks. But to build off of what Katy's saying, I think then we need to also ensure that we're combining that kind of policy and regulatory knowledge to understand how to move things through that system. But it doesn't even matter to me kind of what the problem is. But the future, if we're going to build a healthy future, I believe strongly that we're only going to do that with a multidisciplinary perspective, where we're able to kind of bring together all these different points of view to ensure that we're learning from our past.
When you say healthy future, what is possible when we get this right? When we think about public interest and public good as the core for the why, like what is working well? What kind of systems are better for most communities that we live in?
When we think about trying to do inclusive development work on a tech product or platform, the difficulty is the pace, right? We were talking about how everything has to move so fast, and there's this incredible pressure on tech products, especially in this world where AI is in the news every single day and everyone wants to be launching something AI related. Like, there's a lot of intentionality and work at like building the right table and putting the right people in those seats and like opening it up and creating safety, like psychological safety for people to actually feel like they can contribute to this work. Like, I think for communities, and that word can be defined so many ways, right? Like, there are various types of community, but for any community that you're in to feel like they have the space to have a say in what technology they are being exposed to or being or using every day. Like, we are using so much technology every day, maybe by choice, maybe not. And we have no say in the data collection. We have no say in the uses and privacy. We are really sort of in a vortex of pervasive tech. And not to make it sound like this is not Black Mirror, but we are not in control in a way that I think has robbed humans of the agency to make decisions about where they want their data to be, or what they want their kids to see when they are clicking through YouTube videos, like those kind of things. And so I think what would be ideal is for people to have more agency. Like, I think part of why we at Siegel were attracted to New Public and the vision that Deepti and Eli and the other members of the team have is that public parks and libraries, like there's agency that you have in a public space because it is a space that's for you and others. And so there's agency and there's collaboration and there's all these good things that we think make for healthy societal interaction. I think we just have right now a society that is not, whether online or offline, is not at optimal health. Like, we're just not talking to each other the way that we could be. We're not engaging with each other the way that we should be. We're just in our bubbles, in our boxes, sort of on our phones. And how we change that and make these spaces that are actually joyful and not just cesspools and echo chambers, and like that, I think, is the hard work, and where I'm hopeful that we'll get something good out of this new tech.
I am super optimistic in terms of kind of getting to a healthier place. And I think it's really, it's grounded in good reasons. Like, there are hundreds of builders and engineers and designers and developers who are really attempting to make these new pro-social and public spirited places on the internet. And similarly, there are many, many, many what we call stewards, unpaid volunteers moderating and administering communities in places like Reddit and Wikipedia and Facebook groups. Like, to us, these are the people who are the future leaders of the internet. and we can learn and we can co-design and we can support them. And for us, that means philanthropic capital right now, like working as a nonprofit to create the space for imagination for what public on the internet can look like. And I don't know, it is a really joyful movement to be a part of. Is it a subscale movement? Yeah, it's a subscale movement, but everything was subscale at some point. And, this is, you know, this to us is the future. I mean, actually, what's coming to my mind right now is Mark Andreessen's manifesto on tech optimism. I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago now, that like anybody who cares about tech safety or ethics is an enemy of building. Like for us, that couldn't be further from the truth. Like the people who care about making the social internet a place, as Katy said, that is joyful, a place that's nice to spend time in, about making platforms safe and effective places to host communities. These are the people who are actually building the future. Like the future is in their hands. You mentioned the parks and the library analogy earlier, Leah, and Katy just kind of nodded to it. We really like that analogy because what we're saying is that we need libraries that are publicly funded, that do give people agency and that serve this public purpose. But we also need the local small bookshops, who are working on a sustainability, who are profitable, and the malls may have a role to play in our lives too. And that's our corollary for the Facebooks, and they can keep doing, but we need to be able to expand our imagination and our vision of the sorts of spaces that we are all able to spend time on in the internet, and for what purpose and for what sort of connection and community we're looking for. So that's what makes me see a clear path to a healthy internet, but it's because I get to spend time every day with these builders and these stewards who are doing, who've rolled up their sleeves and are doing the work.
Renegade Capital Podcast is proud to partner with Progressive Pockets, as together we tackle how we can build the world we want through our daily money decisions. Join Renegade Capital to learn what tools and resources are available to finance a world in which no one is left out. Listen today on your favorite streaming service.
Katy, your organization, how long have you been investing in creating space for imagination and innovation? And are there other philanthropies kind of following suit?
Yeah, I think so. We've been doing this sort of work for, I guess, our entire existence in one way or another. Like the earliest iterations of our mission were really about just supporting people who had great ideas about how to solve these tech and society problems. And that's still core to what we do, even though the mission and vision are more sophisticated now. But ultimately, it's about kind of finding people who are proximate to the problems and empowering them to find creative solutions. I have really beat this metaphor up, but I like to talk about will problems and way problems. Will problems are problems where we know what the answer is, we just don't have the will to solve something. I say hunger is a really good example because there's actually no reason in terms of knowledge and capability that we should have people go hungry in the world. And yet we do because we lack sort of political will and some infrastructure to solve that problem. There's the capitalist thing, all that. But we could solve it. Way problems are problems where we actually don't know how to do something. We don't know what the answer is. We don't know what the solution is. We don't know what we're focused on, or we don't know what we should be focused on to try to get to make this better. And so we need to do the sort of questioning and learning together that you can only get when you invest in people who have new ideas and are coming at the problem from different spaces. So with New Public, it's cool because not only do we have this group of people that are thinking about this in terms of the core team, but then they're creating another group of people who are thinking about this in terms of all the partners they're engaged with. So we're getting this multiplier effect of trying to bring people in to solve these really challenging way problems. And to answer the other part of your question, I think we have some partners in terms of the work we do on public interest technology. that are fellow travelers like Ford Foundation and the McGovern Foundation and Pivotal Ventures and Schmidt Futures, but it always feels like so arrogant to say like there's no one else doing what we do. But there are not a lot of foundations that are necessarily thinking about it this way and approaching it this way and sort of combining all those things. So I think I have, lots of partial friends, but maybe not anyone that's doing the exact same thing.
And this is refreshing, a soapbox that I like to get on, hopefully somewhat diplomatically, is kind of the thinking in philanthropy and, from the ecosystem work, which is kind of what you all are describing, but in a different framing that I do in community. It's like corporate, whatever, the money expects community transformation in 1 to 2 years of the grant performance period. Or they don't want to fund something that's new and innovative. They want something they can measure and track and count the backpacks or count the jobs created. And so it's really refreshing to know that this space is being nurtured and fostered and invested in and has been. This is not new to you all. And it sounds like the thinking, and I think the thinking in philanthropy is shifting, has been shifting since COVID, if not earlier, into kind of more outcome based and letting those of us doing the work tell you and work on the solutions. And so that's encouraging to hear. Deepti, with the investments and like with the kind of outcome based thinking and maybe expectations, I mean, how do you kind of manage the investment and the kind of accountability for the dollars? Is there hard lines or kind of learning in partnership, and that is what makes it work?
I mean, I think what gets us excited about our relationship with Siegel and Katy and many of the other organizations she just mentioned is that it has really felt like partnership on the kind of the new wicked, grimy problem it is that we're trying to solve. And, we're grateful and about partnering with, for example, Katy and Siegel Foundation, not only because of their investment in us, but because of it feels like we're building the field together. And so, for example, what I can share as an example of this is that actually Siegel's investment in New Public actually helped us kind of kick off this like co-design journey. One of my largest gripes at Facebook was that often these community stewards, these group admins that we would work with, who are at the front lines of understanding what would lead to these flourishing and safe communities, didn't have a seat at our design table. We're not part of the decision making. And so at New Public, we're really committed to changing that and wanting to kind of build and design together. And so Siegel support helped us get that kicked off. We started thinking about working with parents and caregivers and teachers to think about the new sorts of tools that could be built to support people to get into healthier community around their school. And we learned a ton from that. Actually, anybody who has kids and maybe using Parent Square, that Parent Square kind of sucks. And so we were trying to figure out like Parent Square isn't actually helping us build community. So what may? And we worked with some kind of underperforming schools here in Oakland to kind of do that work together. And we learned from that sprint. And while that was kind of what Siegel's commitment, what Siegel funded us to do, that work has now evolved into something that we're calling the Community Stewards Guild, where we're starting a network of a number of different community stewards to kind of come together to be able to co-design and co-create with them. But all just to say that Katy, Laura, and Siegel have been partners through that journey. Not necessarily asking for outcome reports and metrics and numbers, but kind of staying proximate with us to the problem and what we're learning through it.
I will confess that I was very skeptical about AI and how we're thinking about finance, only because I've been burned in the past with finance and thinking about that. But I feel so much more optimistic after talking with you all because I hear the same thought and the same that percolates through community development finance and investing. And you all are saying it in different words than we are. But the extreme importance of listening to the communities and co-designing And Katie, I loved your point that agency and collaboration are necessary for a healthy society, because that's been a huge shift in community investing, or at least how we talk about it. Of in order to address the problems, we need to talk to people who sit closest to those problems because they're always going to have the best insights for the solutions. And so just hearing you all talk about how do we find the people who are proximate to the issue and then empower them to solve it. And I'm totally stealing your words. Makes me extremely optimistic that there's a lot of people thinking about this in very similar ways and doing the hard work of listening, and bringing the right people to the table and thinking about that.
Well, and it's like taking kind of, I feel like you all sit at the 20,000 foot view of, and at the tactical, all the different levels for sure. But how can someone like me or my neighbor or, is there things that we can do as individuals to engage in this work in a meaningful way, even if we're not in the research, and like, how do we influence beyond our day-to-day lives with our capital or our involvement?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of build off of Andrea, your point, and I think it gets to yours too a little bit, Leah, is like there are all of these people who are kind of creating the containers for this co-design and this co-building, and for bringing the communities who are the most affected by some of these decisions into the process. But that in itself is really hard, gnarly work. Like here even at New Public, we have Facebook engineers working with church pastors. Like we ourselves are learning how to speak each other's languages, how to create the containers for mutual trust, because this is not the first time it's been tried. And I think that there's the need is for patience, and is to really create the spaces for that sort of relationality to build so that we can do things in this multidisciplinary way. It is slow work, it's hard work, it's reflective work. And it's only if we invest in all of that kind of foundational capital and process and norms in the how we go about this work that are we going to lead to outcomes that we're proud of, and frankly a speed that we're proud of. Like I like move fast, I like speed, but we're not going to get speed on the problems it is that I care about solving without this kind of investment, this ground level investment that needs to be made, and that requires a lot of patience. And so And I don't think, I think we're lucky to be in a relationship with organizations like Siegel and Katy, but like that's still not fully understood, I think, by the individuals who are often funding this work.
You had a lot of head nods on the screen during the entire time you were talking.
It is the challenge of our times is trying to figure out the right piece for responsible innovation, I think. And that can't just live with those of us who consider ourselves philanthropists or impact investors or community oriented. I think ultimately our work has to filter back out into being kind of a baseline and a set of principles, and it's not just moral and ethical guidance. It's like in many ways it's practical guidance, because if we, to be extreme, destroy society, if the whole thing implodes, no one's making any money. So it should be guidance for anyone who's thinking about investing in technology or in trying to create organizations or products or platforms that are going to serve some bigger picture goal. Like, what is the community inputting this? Who are you trying to serve, and have you actually heard from them? Are they at the table? Are you solving a problem that exists, or are you just making something and hoping that it makes sense? Like that kind of mindset is also a shift that needs to happen beyond our bubble of enthusiasm and optimism, which I think is good. We need that optimism, but also I want to draw more people in who are not there with us yet and figure out how to get them optimistic about doing this responsibly, in the same way that they're optimistic about just like, oh my God, there's so much potential here. Or, how do we harness AI to do X, Y, and Z? how do we responsibly harness AI and other emerging technologies to do X, Y, and Z is a better question that I hope everyone will be asking.
Well, I think that statement right there is a great way to kind of close down this conversation tonight. Unfortunately, we asked you for an hour and we've used every second of that almost. Because this is just amazing work and fascinating, and really appreciate the time that you're putting into that and sharing that with us tonight. But we do have one question that we ask each one of our guests on every show, and that is, how do you define a renegade? And I'd like to kind of hear your perspective on that before we close out.
I think I'm a renegade. I've been called a professional instigator, and I think that is my renegade nature, right? Like, are you willing to instigate the things that will lead to the change you want to see? I am very willing to instigate in any time and place, but really when it comes to the work, like I think when my friend Erin from Innovate EDU told me, like, you're a professional instigator, and I mean that in the best way possible. It's like, that's the highest compliment. It's actually on my LinkedIn now. It is my headline.
You got called an instigator. I got called a bulldozer, but that doesn't have anything to do with being a renegade. And so renegade, like, I don't know. I was actually confused when I heard the word renegade. So I looked it up, and the Oxford Dictionary says a person who deserts and betrays an organization, country, or set of principles. And I guess that doesn't really capture the spirit of what it means to be a renegade. To me, I think it is about, I don't think it's about necessarily just kind of like leaving something behind and jumping to the next shiny new thing. I do think it goes back to what we started at the top of this conversation, which is kind of holding the pluralism of everything. Like, what can we take? Like, being a renegade means to me, like, being brave enough to see that there's truth everywhere, and that, like, you're going to try to kind of find your path in the truth, taking the experiences from the past. And so, yeah, I don't know. I love that that's what this podcast is called, and that's what y'all's work is called, and that you've given me this new kind of concept and word to be thinking about.
No, I want to talk to them for like 5 more hours. So, tell us about this little tiny piece that I heard about once on, TikTok. Like, no, for real. I mean, I just can't even imagine that world. Just no understanding of like how you would even from a policy standpoint, like the type of, I don't even want to say education because that's more formal in my mind, but like experience and knowledge with the questions that they're seeking to answer around the policy table and kind of user experience. I mean, like,
it surprises me that you say that though, Leah, because you do. Like, you tackle finance on a public policy level all the time, and finance is a huge system too. So it actually surprises me that you say that, because I saw so many parallels in AI and internet and social media and what they're talking about, and finance, and how it's, you tackle one thing at a time. And I felt really optimistic that there are people in that world having the same conversations that we have in finance.
Yeah, I think finance in my mind is more baked and like, just, it's not learning on itself. And it's not a niche expertise that in the same way that this fast growing generative technology is. Also opposite, I think, of what I was interpreting some of your comments, Andrea, is like, I think the regulation and compliance is what has left people out of finance and capital access. And so getting like some of the fintechs not being regulated actually has created access to, different types of ways of banking and trading money and earning money. And it's like, I mean, there's that middle ground that we, so while I do the other side of this is, yes, we need somebody with some guardrails, but the regulations and compliance in the financial sector is what was used to block access. So,
like Deepti said, there's many truths, and finding what your truth is and staying in that, being comfortable in that lane and tackling it from that makes a powerful renegade, no matter what your sector, your industry is.
Ebony, what do you think?
I especially appreciated Deepti's comments because I often think about the language barrier between different groups. And for someone in this space to acknowledge publicly, hey, we're still learning each other's languages. To me, that's powerful. And it's also an example that this isn't going to happen overnight. And I appreciate that. I think our slogan for this season should be a renegade is a professional instigator. I really like that because I always thought about instigator as like somebody starting some mess.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Renegade Capital. If you like what you heard, you can listen to previous episodes on your favorite podcast platform, and be sure to follow us on social media at Renegade Capital, or check out our website www.renegadecapitalpodcast.com to never miss a new release. Our show is hosted by Andrea Longton, Ebony Perkins, and Leah Freemount, publicized by Elizabeth Gilbert Ketzel of Narrator Studios, and produced by yours truly, Chance Lee.